Hello, writers. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I am a working screenwriter and a working script doctor, and welcome to The Right Stuff. We're going to talk today about a subject that a lot of writers love to push back on, which is specifically directing other departments on the page. Most often it happens with the camera department. When it's not happening with the camera department, most of the time it's happening with the composer. A lot of people love to write music into their screenplays. But it happens with production design, it happens with costuming, it even happens with micromanaging acting performances. Okay? Over the course of these blogs, we have really drilled home on the idea that it is the efforts of the characters to achieve their goals that drive the story. And the specific ways in which our characters try to achieve their goals, they define the characters. The resources that a character has, if they're trying to do something that's unsustainable and overwhelmingly challenging, they're going to run through all of their personal resources, all of their relationships, everything that they have to bring to the table in an effort to make this happen before they have overextended themselves so completely that they really do just kind of destroy their world and have to find a different way to go about it. That arc is going to showcase their relationships as they scramble to achieve their goal. It's going to showcase their emotional reserves. It's going to showcase the whole thing. And if you stay focused on, how that character is trying to execute those efforts, then you're always going to have something compelling in front of the camera to watch. And that's going to make sure that your director, whether that happens to be you or somebody else, has something great to shoot that day, and that they have something good to send back into the editing room. Okay. So, the first and most obvious reason not to put any focus into production design, camera work, or anything that doesn't immediately inform the action itself is that you're taking time away from the actors. If you decide to go ahead and describe the brocade on someone's shirt, and if they did not make that, if that character did not make that shirt specifically for the occasion on which they're wearing it, in other words, if the brocade was not put there by the character specifically because they're doing something that makes that brocade necessary in that moment, then you are asking the director of photography to put attention on something that isn't pertinent to the action. You're asking for a reactive moment, or at least a passive moment where you're feeding information to the audience. And even if you are the director, and even if you're describing that brocade so that you remember how it's supposed to look, and you're not going to linger on it, it's just going to be there in the subtext, that is still a moment on the page that could have been devoted to the actors. That isn't. Your film just got 20 seconds shorter because you spent, a fifth of a page describing the shirt. And that throws everything off, at least on some level. It's not efficient or worth your time. There's other documents where you can get into that stuff. Write a separate document about the shirt if you need to. At the end of the day, there's another, arguably more compelling reason not to get into the details of other people's work in the screenplay, which is that hopefully they're better at their jobs than you are. If you or your producer hires a DP to shoot your film, then ideally that DP is going to be somebody, a director of photography, a cinematographer, is going to be somebody who has shot hundreds of thousands of hours of footage. They're somebody who lives behind a camera, right? They're going to show up on set, walk out on set, and the experience that they have lining up shots and setting things up, shooting action, and finding the camera angles and the lighting conditions and the framing that gives that action meaning means that they're going to have, 15 or 20 shot ideas just looking at an empty set before they even get their hands on a cup of coffee. Your film composition brain isn't that fast, and it's not that efficient. Okay? So if you go ahead and you write a shot into the film, that shot is going to stand out as inefficient and amateur. If you have this amazing thematic idea that kind of sets everything up and sets the whole aesthetic and establishes all the things that you're trying to establish in one perfect visual composition, I guarantee you that shot is going to stand out as heavy-handed. When the DP would have found a way to say all the things that you're saying without interrupting the action of the story to do it. Almost every Netflix fantasy opens with one of these shots, as a matter of fact. There's inevitably some kind of transition from a magical world into the real world or vice versa. A leaf is blowing across a landscape and all of a sudden it's fairyland, or whatever the case might be. And there's always a voiceover. And the voiceover is there because the shot didn't work in the cut, but it was too expensive to get rid of. I promise you, that shot was put there by the writer. It always stands out. You can't get around it. So my strong recommendation is to focus on the actions of the characters, put something fantastic in front of the camera, and let the DP work out how it needs to be photographed to make the most of the themes and the metaphors that are at play in the subtext. And the same is equally true for the costume design. If you have a period show or a period film that requires a certain approach to sewing, and you have done all your research, it would still be an epic disaster if your costume designer didn't know 20 times more about that subject matter than you do. And if you think you have amazing ideas about how those costumes need to be constructed or what needs to go into them, I invite you to write that stuff down in a separate document. But before you even admit the existence of that document to your costume designer, you should sit down and listen to what that person has to say about the film. Because I guarantee you they're going to be 5 steps ahead of you, or they shouldn't be designing costumes for your movie. Because you are not a costume designer. You don't have that level of experience. You haven't been working with these ideas every single day of your life for the last 15 years or 20 years or however long these people have been in business. The same is going to be true of the makeup artist. Anybody with any craft. Which brings us back to the actors. Anytime you write a sigh into your script, or you have an actor exhale at a dramatically appropriate moment, 2 things are going wrong. First of all, it's a reaction every single time. You have just put that actor on their heels. It is always more compelling to watch someone hold their breath and try and achieve the thing that they're trying to achieve, even though they can't breathe, than it is to watch them breathe out. Don't try to micromanage the emotional tonality of your actors' performances. Give them super compelling things to do, and let them do those things in whatever way seems best to them. One of the things that I always like to bring up is the fact that you can't play drunk. I know this seems unrelated. You can't play drunk. Anyone who's been at a college party knows what I'm talking about. If you pretend to be off balance, if you pretend to slur your speech, it looks like you're pretending. You can't play drunk convincingly. What you have to do to appear drunk is play sober. Try to maintain eye contact. Try not to slur at all. Try to speak clearly. as hard as you can, and you're going to start seeming more drunk the harder you try. Try not to shake or waver. Try to hold yourself very still, and you're just going to seem more and more drunk until eventually until you've reached the point of ridiculousness. But it's very easy to play drunk in that way because nobody pretends to be sober unless they have to. In the same way, you don't showcase a character's emotions through their reactions. You let them keep pursuing their goal. Right? If a character is scared, let them try their hardest to be brave. Don't showcase the fear. The harder they're trying to be brave, the more scared they obviously are. If somebody is trying to be okay with this, if somebody's really not okay with the situation, let them try to get through it as best they can. Let them try not to tip their hand. If somebody's feeling disgust, let them try not to show it. Let them try to finish what they were doing. Stay focused on the action. And just let a character be very specific in how they pursue their action. If they need to swallow their disgust to keep doing what they're doing, that's not a reaction. But if they're just swallowing because they've been gut punched, that's a reaction. Don't micromanage the actors' performances into a reactive place. Give them specific ways to pursue their goals and keep your hands off. Apart from that is my strong, strong, strong recommendation. The other thing that goes wrong, of course, when we micromanage the performances of our actors is that you are not, ideally, as good of an actor as the person you're casting in this role. There's two kinds of screenplays. This is the last thing I'm going to say. There's two kinds of screenplays out there. There's the screenplay where you've written a beautiful story on the page, and every single person who touches that script takes 2% away from its perfection, and you just sit there and watch it turn into a pile of shit. Right? Every actor who signs up for this performance and puts their fingers on the characters, every actor that gets involved in the production winds up taking between 1% and 3% away from what the movie could have been. The director takes away a solid 5%. They 95% got it. They did pretty good. The director of photography misses a couple of opportunities, and they wind up taking an additional 10%. By the time this thing hit the makeup artist, again, the set designer, the costume designer, PAs are making noises in the background. You lose a shot here and there. By the time this thing gets to the editing room, you're down to about 45% of what the movie should have been. And you're trying to fix it by recutting it into a Frankenstein monster, bringing in the composer to create some heavy-handed score just to make the audience feel something, and writing a voiceover to try and make the whole thing make sense. That's where that leads. And eventually, you release a film that you don't feel good about. Why did that happen? Because the film was passive. You created an emotional portrait of what happened to the character, and you created a bunch of perfect reactions on the page. You wrote literature. But you didn't give the actors actions to perform. The film, the story, the narrative is not driven by the efforts of the characters to achieve their overwhelmingly challenging, unsustainable goals. On the other hand, some scripts take on a life of their own. You give the actors those strong actions to perform, and they are creating the story through their efforts to achieve their overwhelmingly challenging, unsustainable goals. And they perform those actions with as much specificity as they can on top of the specificity that you brought to the table. And you wind up getting surprised by a lot of those performances. You wind up seeing the characters in new dimensions. But it doesn't feel like the script's perfection is being impacted in any kind of way. Instead, they are adding to what you brought to the table. They are piling their excellence and their craft and their experience and everything else that they have to bring to the project on top of what you had to bring to the project. And then the director photographs that, and they photograph it in a way that brings out new metaphors and new dimensions and drives home the subtext in powerful ways that you didn't expect. The lighting designer does the same thing, and the costume designer does the same thing. By the time this movie hits the editing bay, you have about 600% of what you thought you were going to have, and the editor has nothing but choices. And in the end, the cut is probably going to be not so different from what you had on the page. Maybe a scene gets dropped here and there, but it's going to be mostly exactly what you had on the page, except somehow it's so much better and very different from what you thought it was going to be. And when that movie gets put in front of an audience, they get blown away by it. And it's not strange that that's happening. Okay? This is the magic of cinema. This is how it works. When the audience sits down in that movie theater and they watch those characters do the things that you wrote them doing, there's a part of their brain that thinks they're only watching one person do one thing. They don't realize that they're watching the actor and the director and the cinematographer and, the lighting people and everybody else bring as much specificity and life to this performance as possible. They're actually in that one performance, watching that one person, the editor, the musicians, everybody. They're watching 100 people deliver that performance. It's so much better than what they expect. And spectacle, as we have said before, is the effect of watching people do things we didn't realize people could do. We didn't realize an actor could be that amazing because they're not. Even if they were better than we imagined they could be, even if we underestimated them to begin with, and we probably did, we are certainly not prepared in that audience to see the work of 100 people layered into that one person's performance. You get spectacle that way. So, write those lines of action. Stay focused on rendering the actions that you're handing to your actors with as much specificity and urgency and conflict as possible. Don't get distracted by other people's work. And you wind up empowering everybody else on that set to do something amazing. That's my rant. Thank you very much for watching. Again, if you like what we do here on The Right Stuff, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. We'll do another video for you next week, and I look forward to learning with you.